Hey newbie, don't forget to scrub the toilets this time. The CEO might drop by in disguise again. A voice jeered, followed by a round of mocking laughter. The warehouse buzzed with the clang of crates and the low hum of conveyor belts. Somewhere near the break room, a man in overalls wiped sweat from his brow and kept his head down. No one paid much attention to him. Just another new temp worker, probably desperate for a paycheck. His name? Jack Grayson. The real name, that is. But around here, he was Joe, the quiet, middle-aged janitor who rarely spoke unless spoken to. What the employees didn't know was that Jack Grayson wasn't just any temp worker. He was the billionaire CEO of Grayson Logistics, the very company they worked for. Dressed in a $10 thrift store outfit and steel-toed boots, Jack had returned undercover to find out why morale was down, turnover was high, and productivity had dropped. But what he discovered that afternoon in the break room made his blood boil. Two floor managers, Eric and Tanya, lounged at the table sipping coffee. You know what the problem is? Half the staff are idiots, and the other half are just lazy. Eric sneered. Tanya snorted. The only time they hustle is when corporate's in town. Remember last month? All those fake smiles and clean floors just for the CEO's visit. Jack stood quietly by the mop sink, listening. If that guy ever showed up unannounced, I swear he'd pass out from the stench in the bathroom alone. Eric joked. They didn't know Jack had cleaned that bathroom himself the day before. Nor did they know the idiot stocking shelf beside them had a Harvard MBA and had built the company from the ground up. And now, he'd heard enough. Jack made a silent vow. By the end of the week, these two would be the ones scrambling for a job. Not because he was vengeful, but because this company deserved better. Ethan had been at the loading dock for 3 days. Wearing a faded hoodie, steel-toe boots, and a fake name badge that read Eric, he blended right in with the rest of the warehouse team. Nobody knew the man moving crates alongside them owned the entire company. WY day. He lifted heavy boxes and sat in on team meetings. By night, he jotted down observations in a leather-bound notebook and sent encrypted messages to his executive assistant. IT didn't take long to see the cracks. He saw how supervisors ignored safety protocols, barked at employees, and rushed shipments out the door without quality checks. Workers were underpaid and overworked. Some clocked in sick just to avoid getting written up. But what shocked him most was the toxic culture on the third day. During a coffee break, 2 warehouse leads stood near the vending machine, laughing. Did you see the memo that came down from corporate? One sneered. That clown of a CEO wants us to be more people-focused. Yeah, right. Like he's ever been on a loading dock. The other snorted. Ethan Royce wouldn't last 1 hour down here. I bet his handshake is softer than a baby wipe. Ethan sipped his coffee, keeping his head down. Oh, and that new guy, what's his name? Eric? The first one said, pointing in Ethan's direction. Total loser. Can't lift a box without breaking a sweat. I'd fire him tomorrow. Ethan calmly tossed his cup and walked away. His jaw was clenched, but not from the insult, from disappointment. By the end of the week, Ethan had become invisible, and he used that power wisely. He sat through careless team huddles where ideas were shot down before they could breathe. He watched as a young, bright-eyed intern named Lily was mocked by her manager for suggesting an efficient workflow. She had diagrams, notes, and initiative, but her ideas were dismissed because she wasn't senior enough. Later, during a lunch break, Ethan found Lily sitting alone near the loading dock, nibbling on a sandwich. "You okay?" he asked, still in character as Eric. She looked up and forced a smile. Yeah, it's just frustrating, you know? You try to make things better, but no one wants to listen. Sometimes I wonder why I even try. Ethan gave her a reassuring nod. Keep trying. Some people do notice. Lily chuckled softly. Well, I guess I'll keep making notes for my someday job, where people actually care. That night, Ethan sent a voice memo to his assistant. Lily, last name Chun, pull her file. She's sharp. We may have found our next operations lead. But not all observations were positive. He compiled a list of chronic underperformers. Those who mocked customers behind their backs, faked time cards, spread gossip, and belittled junior staff. Some of them had been with the company for years, hiding behind tenure and titles, but he also uncovered a disturbing trend, a hidden culture of retaliation. Employees who spoke up about inefficiencies or toxic behavior were often transferred or fired. HR complaints were conveniently lost. And a few team leads seemed to wield their authority like a weapon. That'd be why the end of his undercover stint. Ethan had seen enough that IT was time to return, not as Eric, but as Ethan Royce, CEO, and Judgment Day was coming. Monday morning arrived like thunder. The employees at Royce Solutions' downtown office were told there would be an urgent company-wide town hall. No explanation, no agenda. Just an instruction, be in the conference room at 9 a.m. sharp. Attendance is mandatory. They gathered, grumbling, coffee in hand. A few rolled their eyes when they saw Eric standing near the stage, clipboard in hand. What's Janitor Boy doing here? One of the HR managers whispered to a colleague, laughing. Maybe he's sweeping up after the meeting. Another chuckled. Maybe he's auditioning to be a motivational speaker. Lily sat quietly in the back, confusion written across her face. She had seen something in Eric, kindness, thoughtfulness, but even she hadn't guessed the truth that at exactly 9 a.m., the lights dimmed. The projector screen behind Eric lit up with a Royce Solutions logo. A moment later, a montage of employee interviews, store footage, and team interactions began to play. People started to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Then, the video paused and Eric stepped forward. But something was different. He wore a tailored suit, no more disguise, no clipboard. His back was straight, shoulders broad, face sharp and confident. My name, he said, his voice firm and commanding, is Ethan Royce. Gasps erupted across the room. I've been working undercover for the last 4 weeks, observing, listening, and learning. I pose as a janitor to see how my company really operates behind closed doors. A few mouths dropped. The HR manager who had mocked him earlier suddenly went pale. Ethan continued, and what I found was both inspiring and disappointing. He turned to Lily in the back. Some of you showed integrity, creativity, and heart. Lily Chun, for example. Your ideas could save this company millions. Lily blinked, stunned. Ethan nodded. You've just been promoted to Director of Process Innovation. Applause burst out, but it was short-lived. Others, he turned to face the front rows, his gaze sharp as a blade, have betrayed the trust of this company and of your coworkers. You belittled colleagues, ignored customer needs, and fostered toxicity. He paused. To those individuals, you're being let go. Effective immediately. A collective gasp. HR personnel began quietly handing out termination letters to stunned faces. This isn't revenge, Ethan said. It's restoration. Because this company was built on respect, collaboration, and dignity. And I intend to protect that. He turned back to the crowd. We moved forward, stronger, smarter, and better than before. The room erupted into applause, some clapping with relief, others in awe, and a few with fear. But Ethan didn't care about the fear, he cared about the change. News of Ethan Royce's undercover operation spread like wildfire, not just inside the company, but across the business world. The video of the town hall, which had been discreetly recorded by someone in the crowd, went viral within hours. Headlines popped up all over social media and business news platforms. CEO goes undercover and it shocks everyone. Royce Solutions CEO fires staff live after undercover stint. The real-life undercover boss with consequences. Inside the company, reactions were mixed. Some employees were thrilled. They finally felt seen, heard, and valued. Others panicked, wondering if they'd said something out of line during Ethan's undercover days. Or went into overdrive managing the fallout. The terminated employees made noise on social media, calling it unfair and a publicity stunt, but the public wasn't buying it. Most commoners praised Ethan's boldness. This is what leadership looks like. Respect to the CEO for doing the dirty work himself. More bosses should go undercover to see the real culture of their companies. Ethan, meanwhile, wasn't basking in the attention. He was back in his office, focused, analyzing reports, setting new policies, and meeting with department heads. But one meeting stood out. Lily, still slightly shell-shocked from her sudden promotion, stepped into his office. "You wanted to see me?" she asked cautiously. Ethan smiled. "Come in." Close the door. She did. "I owe you an apology," he said sincerely. "I shouldn't have put you in a position where you were confiding in me without knowing who I really was." Lily shook her head. "You listened. That's more than most managers ever did." Ethan leaned back. "You believed in better. You spoke up. And that's why I want you leading more than just process innovation." Her eyes widened. "I want you to help shape the new culture of Royce Solutions. A company where ideas come from everywhere, not just the top." Lily blinked. "You're serious?" "As a heart attack." She smiled. "Then I'm in." Ethan didn't just talk about change, he enacted it. Within a week of the town hall, the entire leadership team was required to attend empathy and diversity training. Middle managers were given anonymous performance reviews from their direct reports. A new policy called the listening hour was implemented. Every week, executives would spend 1 hour sitting with employees from different departments, not to talk, but to listen. Lily became the face of the Ground Up Initiative, a program designed to surface innovative ideas directly from frontline employees. She was given a dedicated team, a budget, and direct access to Ethan himself. For the first time in years, Royce Solutions buzzed with real energy. Employees no longer dragged their feet to meetings or kept their heads down to avoid rocking the boat. They were pitching ideas, challenging outdated procedures, and speaking up about things that had been broken for years. Ethan made it a point to walk the halls daily. Not in disguise this time, but openly. People greeted him. Some shook his hand. Others stopped him with feedback, both praise and criticism. And he welcomed it all, but not everyone embraced the new era. Travis, the once arrogant manager who had mocked Ethan during his undercover shift, had gone on a public rant about his firing. He tried to sue the company for wrongful termination, but the case didn't hold water, especially with video evidence of his behavior and a signed employee conduct agreement. Still, Ethan kept an eye out. He knew public perception was a fragile thing, and revenge could come from unexpected corners. But for now, he focused on the wins. Profits were up. Employee retention improved. For the first time, Roy Solutions was ranked on a national top companies to work for list. In a staff meeting, Ethan stood before his team, no suit jacket, sleeves rolled up, hands resting on the conference table. This company was built with sweat and sacrifice, he said. Somewhere along the way, we got too comfortable at the top, but I've seen the fire at the base. That fire is what's going to take us forward. He looked at Lily and the other new leaders around the table. And now, we build a company that respects everyone, from the mailroom to the boardroom. Just as Roy Solutions was finally hitting its stride, an unexpected problem arose. Not from outside competitors, but from within. That a confidential internal report was leaked to a business gossip blog. It included sensitive details about Ethan's undercover operation, the firings, and even a few personal notes from his private email. The piece painted Ethan as a ruthless tyrant playing king of the castle with his employees' lives. Headlines blared. CEO plays spy games. Company culture in chaos. Undercover boss or undercover bully. Ethan sat in his office reading the piece, jaw tight. The timing couldn't have been worse. Just as they were planning to roll out a nationwide expansion campaign, his phone buzzed. It was Lily. "I didn't want to bother you," she said, "but people are panicking. Let's meet in 10, Ethan replied. When Lily arrived, she wasn't alone. She brought Emma from HR and Raj from IT. "We think we know how the leak happened," Raj said, pulling up an encrypted laptop. He displayed login timestamps from a restricted server. "Only a few people had access to these internal documents," Emma explained. "But one of them downloaded files outside regular work hours, from an IP traced to an apartment complex in Midtown." Ethan leaned forward. "Who was it?" Raj clicked through to the user profile. "Jason Barnes," Raj said. "Marketing coordinator. Recently promoted. Quiet but connected. He was friends with Travis." Ethan stared at the screen. He remembered Jason, polite, reserved, always fading into the background. No one suspected a thing. Jason was summoned to Ethan's office the next morning. He walked in, visibly nervous but trying to appear calm. "Jason, have a seat," Ethan said, motioning to the chair across from his desk. "Jason, Saturdays, is something wrong?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slid a printed copy of the blog article across the desk. Highlighted were phrases that only someone with insider knowledge could have known. Jason swallowed hard. "You access confidential files without authorization," Ethan said, his voice low and steady. "Then leak them to a blog known for clickbait and half-truths." "What?" Jason shifted in his seat. "I didn't mean for it to blow up like this. I just thought people deserve to know what you were doing." "What I was doing?" Ethan asked. "You mean trying to fix a toxic culture? Holding people accountable? You weren't upset about fairness. You were mad your friend got fired for mocking someone with a disability." Jason didn't answer. Ethan leaned forward. "You didn't leak this because you care. You did it for attention, for clout, maybe even to curry favor with someone in the media." Jason's expression changed from nervous to defiant. "You think you're some kind of hero? You came down from your penthouse to play undercover boss and expected a standing ovation." Ethan stood. "I expected honesty. Integrity. I expected to find employees who cared about the company, not opportunists willing to sell out for a headline." Security stepped in just then, silent and professional. Jason's face fell. "You're firing me?" "No," Ethan said coldly. "I'm making sure you never step foot in this company again." Jason was escorted out of the building, his employee badge deactivated before he even reached the elevator. The next day, the news hit hard. The media frenzy Jason had hoped to capitalize on now turned against him. The blog he'd leaked information to was hit with backlash from both the public and professionals who saw it as a breach of ethics. But Jason wasn't the only one affected. Ethan sat in his office, watching the storm unfold on his laptop. His PR team was working overtime to handle the damage, issuing statements and trying to limit the fallout. Yet despite the media frenzy, there was one thing Ethan was certain about. The company was better off without the individuals who had betrayed him. His decision to go undercover was harsh, but necessary. "You did the right thing," his PR director, Angela, said as she entered his office. "Jason's out, and the others who've mocked you. We're getting ahead of this." Ethan nodded. "It's not just about firing them. It's about the culture we're building. This company can't afford to keep people who don't align with our values." But Ethan knew the real challenge was yet to come. The blog's revelations had struck a chord with employees still loyal to the company. Those who had witnessed the mockery of their CEO, who had seen his hard work firsthand. They were beginning to speak out in Ethan's defense. Despite the public backlash, more positive stories were flooding the internet. Employees were starting to share their own experiences of how Ethan had turned the company around, how he had supported them during difficult times. For every negative tweet, there were 2 or 3 in his favor point. One of his favorite messages came from an employee who'd been with the company for years. "I've been with the company for 10 years, and I've never seen a CEO work as hard as Ethan. He's about fairness, integrity, and making sure we all thrive." As the day wore on, the storm of negativity started to subside. Jason's name became a punchline, while Ethan's leadership was being praised more than ever. But it wasn't just the media or the public that made Ethan feel the satisfaction of his actions. When he saw his employees smiling as they went about their work, he knew the company was moving in the right direction. It had been a week since the chaos started, and things were slowly beginning to return to normal in the company. The executives had been replaced, the employees who mocked Ethan were gone, and the media storm had quieted. But Ethan knew that this wasn't just about saving face. It was about building something stronger. The day arrived when he scheduled a company-wide meeting to address everything. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. He needed to restore faith in the leadership and the direction the company was heading. As Ethan stood on stage, looking out over his employees, he took a deep breath. His heart raced, not because of the pressure, but because he was about to reveal himself as more than just a CEO. He had always been their leader, but now he would be their ally. "Good morning, everyone," Ethan began, his voice steady and calm. "I'm sure by now you've all heard the rumors, the stories, the scandals. Some of you have felt betrayed, confused, maybe even frustrated. And I understand that. I've been in your shoes." There was a murmur of surprise as Ethan paused. The room was filled with anticipation. They weren't expecting this type of transparency. "I want to tell you the truth," he continued. "I went undercover in this company, pretending to be someone else. I wanted to see firsthand how you all were treated, how we were operating on the ground level." Gasps echoed in the room, and Ethan held up his hand to silence them. "And I'll be honest with you, I was shocked. Some of the people I trusted, who I thought were working for the good of this company, were mocking me, undermining my leadership, and worse, undermining you. He let the weight of his words settle over the room. So I made the decision to let them go. Some of them will be publicly held accountable, but more importantly, we need to learn from this. We need to grow, because this company, this family, is about respect. It's about collaboration, and it's about loyalty. The employees who had been directly affected by the firings stood up, applauding Ethan. The recognition that he had been willing to sacrifice his own pride for the good of the company didn't go unnoticed. You see, Ethan said with a smile, this isn't just about making a statement to the public. It's about the culture we create here, the values we live by. And I want you all to know that I'll always have your back, just like you've had mine. A ripple of applause spread throughout the room, and for the first time in days, Ethan felt a sense of peace. His company, though scarred, was stronger for it. His employees were ready to move forward, and so was he. As the meeting wrapped up, Ethan made his way out of the conference room. He could already hear the buzz of conversation among the employees. They were talking not just about the firings, but about the future. Ethan smiled. It had been a rough road, but the right path was always the hardest to walk. And as the company began to rebuild, so did the trust of his people. The days that followed the company-wide meeting were full of mixed emotions. On the surface, everything appeared to be returning to normal. Sales were steady, production was on track, and the media had largely moved on. But for Ethan, the journey was far from over. The true test was still ahead. How to restore a culture of transparency and accountability after the damage that had been done. Ethan spent the next few weeks meeting individually with employees, from the entry-level staff to the senior managers. He wanted to hear their thoughts, their concerns, and their ideas for how the company could improve. He wasn't just trying to rebuild trust. He was also determined to create an environment where everyone felt heard and valued. During one of these meetings, he sat down with Sarah, one of the customer service representatives who had been with the company for over 5 years. She was quiet at first, but when Ethan asked her how she was feeling about the changes, she let out a long breath and leaned forward. "I appreciate what you did, Ethan," Sarah said. "I really do, but it's hard to forget what happened. We've been lied to for so long. You didn't just lose our trust, you broke it." Ethan nodded, acknowledging her pain. "I know," he said softly. "I'm sorry for that, but I want to prove to you that I'm not just the CEO. I'm someone you can rely on, someone who listens, someone who works alongside you." Sarah looked at him, still skeptical. "It's going to take time, but I'll give you a chance." That was all Ethan needed to hear. It wasn't going to be an overnight fix. Trust wasn't something that could be repaired with a single speech or a few apologies. It was going to take time, effort, and a commitment from every level of the company to rebuild. Meanwhile, the media coverage of the Undercover scandal continued to fade. Ethan had been the subject of a few think pieces, some praising his decision to go undercover, others criticizing him for not acting sooner. But the public opinion, while important, was secondary to Ethan's focus. His true mission now was the internal healing of his company. In the weeks that followed, Ethan introduced several new policies aimed at promoting transparency and encouraging feedback. Employee surveys were implemented, where staff could anonymously voice their opinions on management and the company's culture. Town hall meetings became a regular occurrence, where employees had direct access to Ethan and other top executives. There were growing pains, of course. Some employees were still hesitant, still wary of the leadership. But as time passed, the changes began to take root. Small victories started to accumulate. An increase in employee engagement, a more positive work environment, and, most importantly, a renewed sense of loyalty to the company. Ethan found himself working harder than ever. There was no longer any room for complacency. He had learned that being a CEO wasn't just about making decisions from the top down. It was about building a culture from the ground up, one where every voice mattered. Months passed, and the company began to show signs of real transformation. Ethan watched as employees started taking ownership of their roles in a way they hadn't before. It was no longer just about doing their job. It was about contributing to something larger, something they felt proud to be a part of. There was a renewed sense of optimism in the air. The first major test of this shift came during the annual company conference, an event where executives would present new initiatives and set the tone for the year ahead. Ethan had decided to make it a more interactive event this time, inviting employees at all levels to speak and share their experiences, not just the high-ranking officers and managers. He wanted to show that leadership wasn't limited to the corner office. It was in every department, every desk. As Ethan took the stage to kick off the event, he was met with a mixed response from the crowd. Some employees applauded, while others sat quietly, still unsure whether the changes were genuine or just temporary. But Ethan wasn't discouraged. He learned that lasting change wasn't about quick fixes. It was about consistency. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice calm but firm. "This year has been a journey, a difficult one for many of us, but a necessary one. And I stand before you today, not as the CEO who runs this company, but as a fellow employee. I've learned more in the past few months than I could have ever imagined, and I want to share some of those lessons with you." The room grew silent, the tension palpable. Ethan continued, his words deliberate. "I've realized that my actions as a leader have consequences. And the biggest mistake I made was not listening to you sooner. I've spent so much time focusing on profits and strategies that I forgot what really matters, what drives this company forward, each and every one of you." There was a shift in the room, a subtle change in energy. Ethan could see it in the way people were sitting, how they were listening intently. He had their attention now. This was what he needed, this moment of connection. "Over the next year, I promise you that our focus will be on transparency, accountability, and respect. We will make decisions together, and we will hold each other to the highest standards. This is no longer just a company where you clock in and out. This is a place where you matter." As Ethan finished his speech, there was a brief moment of silence before the room erupted into applause. But this time it was different. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was a true response from the heart. People were moved, and that was all Ethan needed to know he was on the right track. That afternoon, after the conference wrapped up, Ethan sat in his office, reflecting on everything that had led up to this moment. He thought about the employees who had doubted him, the ones who had mocked him behind his back, and the ones who had fought for change. He thought about the team he had built and the team he still had to rebuild. Ethan smiled to himself. This was just the beginning of a new era, and he was ready for whatever challenges came next. He wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was a leader, and he was determined to prove that to his employees, his company, and himself. As the weeks rolled by, Ethan's efforts to shift the company culture continued to yield positive results. But just as things were starting to settle, a new challenge emerged. One that would test his resolve in ways he hadn't expected. IT began with a report, a major leak in the company's financials. The numbers were wrong. Some of the figures were inflated, others were completely fabricated. It wasn't a small error. This was a deliberate attempt to mislead the shareholders and inflate profits for the past quarter. Ethan's heart sank when he first heard about it. He knew that the company had made significant progress, but this could undo everything. The press would have a field day, and the board of directors would undoubtedly question his leadership. Even worse, it could lead to legal consequences. He immediately called for a meeting with his top executives, including Rachel, who had become one of his most trusted allies throughout this transformation. What happened? Ethan asked, his voice sharp with concern as he scanned the room. Who dropped the ball on this? Rachel shifted uncomfortably in her seat. We don't know yet. We're still looking into it, but there's a strong indication that someone within the finance department may have been involved. The reports show signs of manipulation. Ethan's mind raced as he thought about the implications. The finance department had always been a key player in the company's operations, and this kind of betrayal could cause irreparable damage to their reputation. If the wrong person was responsible, it could tear apart everything they had worked so hard to build. Rachel spoke again, this time her tone more cautious. I think we should take a close look at the team that was working on these reports. It's possible that someone inside the company is trying to sabotage our efforts. Ethan nodded. We'll do that, but I want to be careful about how we handle this. We can't afford to make any rash decisions. I need to know who's responsible before we move forward. The next few days were a blur of meetings, investigations, and frantic calls. The pressure was mounting, and Ethan could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on him. He had come so far in turning the company around, but this scandal threatened to undo all of IT as the investigation continued. Ethan received an unexpected phone call, one that would change everything. Mr. Richardson, the voice on the other end said, I think we need to have a serious conversation. Ethan recognized the voice immediately. It was Bill Harris, a former senior executive who had been fired years ago for unethical behavior. Bill had been a thorn in Ethan's side during his early years as CEO, and he had left the company under a cloud of suspicion. What do you want, Bill? Ethan asked, his voice tight with frustration. I think you need to know something about your finance team, Bill said, his voice dripping with disdain. You're looking the wrong place. Ethan's stomach turned. What are you talking about? I know who's behind the leak, Bill continued, but I also know something else. You've been too soft on your employees. You've let them walk all over you. You think you can change a company by being nice? You've made a huge mistake, Ethan. Ethan was stunned. What do you mean? You think you've got it all figured out, but you're wrong, Bill said with a sneer. I know who the real problem is in your company. And if you want to fix this, you'll have to get rid of the dead weight, your own people. The call ended abruptly, and Ethan sat in stunned silence. Bill's words echoed in his mind, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just another attempt to manipulate him. After the unsettling conversation with Bill, Ethan found himself in a state of turmoil. The financial leak was still unresolved, and now he couldn't shake the feeling that someone close to him, someone inside the company, was behind the mess. The idea that a former executive, someone he had long since fired, could still be pulling strings in the background unnerved him. Despite his frustrations, Ethan decided to keep a cool head. He couldn't afford to let paranoia cloud his judgment. The priority now was to track down the source of the leak, no matter who was behind it. Rachel called him later that afternoon, her voice tense. Ethan, we found something. What is it? He asked, his pulse quickening. We dug into the finance department's records, she began, and we found irregularities. But here's the thing, it doesn't look like the work of a single person. It's more calculated than that. Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. What do you mean, calculated? Rachel hesitated. I'm saying there's a group, an organized effort. Several people may be involved. Some of the employees you trust most could be part of it. Ethan's stomach dropped. He had always prided himself on being a people-first leader, and now it seemed like that very trust was being betrayed. But if he was going to uncover the truth, he needed to remain calm and objective. I want full access to the records. All of them, he said firmly. We need to figure out who's behind this, and we need to do it fast. The next few days were spent combing through mountains of data, auditing emails, and reviewing every detail that had been overlooked. With each passing hour, Ethan became more convinced that there was more at play here than just a financial error. The sabotage went deeper, and the people responsible were closer to him than he ever imagined. One afternoon, while going over a series of suspicious transactions, Ethan stumbled upon something chilling. A name he hadn't seen in years at IT was Adam Blake, the finance director who had been fired just 6 months ago. Adam had left the company under a cloud of suspicion after a series of questionable decisions during a major merger. He had been given a severance package, but his exit had never felt entirely clean. Ethan had always wondered if there was more to the story, but the investigation into Adam's actions had gone cold. Ethan's mind raced. Could Adam be involved in the current scandal? Had he somehow managed to worm his way back into the company? It seemed impossible, but the evidence was undeniable. Ethan immediately called Rachel into his office. "Rachel, look at this," he said, pointing to the screen. "Do you see this?" Rachel leaned over and studied the files. Her face grew pale as she took in the details. "That's Adam's name. How is this possible?" "I don't know. But if Adam is involved in this, then everything we've been working on is in jeopardy," Ethan said. "We need to act fast." Rachel nodded. "I'll get our legal team on it. But if Adam is behind this, it means we've got a mole in the company, and that's going to be a lot harder to deal with." Ethan stared at the screen, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had thought he had rid the company of its toxic elements, but now it seemed like the poison was still there, festering and growing. He picked up the phone and dialed the one number that he knew would provide some answers. "Bill," he said when the other line picked up. "You were right." Bill's voice crackled on the other end of the line. "What do you mean I was right?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at the name on the screen. "It's Adam. He's behind everything. He's manipulating the finance records and trying to sabotage the company." Bill fell silent for a moment, then spoke in a low tone. "That doesn't surprise me. I've had my suspicions about him for a while. But the question is, how did he get back in? I thought we made sure he was gone for good." Ethan's hand clenched into a fist. "He's been hiding in plain sight. I don't know how he did it, but he's been pulling strings behind the scenes. The damage he's caused is bigger than we thought." Bill exhaled sharply. "You need to shut this down fast, Ethan. If you don't, it could mean the end of everything you've worked for." Ethan nodded, already thinking ahead. "I'm setting up a sting operation. We'll catch him red-handed. But we need to be careful. He's a pro at covering his tracks. If we make a mistake, it could blow up in our faces." Bill agreed. "You know I'm in. But you need to be ready for the fallout. If Adam has people in the company, they'll do anything to protect him." Ethan's gaze hardened. "I'm prepared for that. We'll move fast and we'll move smart. I won't let him destroy everything I've built." With a plan in place, Ethan gathered his most trusted allies, Rachel, Bill, and a select group of internal security experts. They would work together to create a foolproof trap that would expose Adam's corruption and bring him down once and for all. The operation would take days to set up, but every detail had to be perfect. They began by tracking down Adam's every move, his emails, his phone records, his interactions with other employees. They knew Adam had to be careful, but they also knew he would slip up sooner or later. The first step was to plant false information in the company's financial reports. They created a series of fake transactions designed to catch Adam's attention. If he was still pulling strings, he would try to cover his tracks by manipulating these records. That IT didn't take long for the bait to work. Late one night, a suspicious email pinged Ethan's inbox, a response to one of the false transactions they had planted. It was from Adam's old company email address, and it confirmed their worst fears. Adam had taken the bait. He was in the process of redirecting funds from one of the company's largest accounts. Ethan's heart raced as he read the email. This was the moment they had been waiting for. They had him. The team worked tirelessly through the night, coordinating every move and making sure the trap they had set was perfect. Ethan's mind raced as he reviewed the details. They had one chance to catch Adam red-handed, and there would be no room for error. Rachel, Bill, and the internal security team had compiled a mountain of evidence, bank statements, transaction logs, and email correspondence that showed Adam's involvement in the embezzlement scheme. But the final piece was still missing. They needed Adam to take the bait in person. The next morning, Ethan called an emergency board meeting. As the company's CEO, he knew he had to keep a cool head, even though the weight of the situation pressed heavily on him. Adam had to be caught at the moment of the transaction. This would be their ace in the hole, proof of his guilt and his intention to steal from the company. The meeting was set up to look completely normal. Ethan had ensured that everyone in the room believed it was just another corporate update until Adam arrived. When he walked in, dressed in his usual impeccable suit, no one could have known what was about to unfold. Ethan had already taken a seat, and his gaze briefly met Rachel's across the table. She gave him a slight nod, Everything was in place. Adam smiled confidently as he walked to his spot at the table. He clearly had no idea what was coming. Ethan could see the arrogance in his eyes. Adam had been coasting on his manipulation for far too long. The meeting began, but Ethan barely paid attention to the reports being presented. His mind was focused on Adam, his every move, his every word. He could see how Adam was trying to position himself, even in this seemingly innocent meeting, as the one with all the answers. That it was only when Rachel made a specific mention of the company's financial status that the tension shifted. She casually referenced the very fake transaction they had set up the night before, noting how strange it was that there had been a sudden shift in the balance of one particular account. That Adam's eyes twitched. His face betrayed the slightest hint of panic, but he quickly recovered. Ethan had seen enough. The trap was working. It was time to spring it. Adam, Ethan said, his voice smooth but firm, why don't you explain these transactions to the room? It looks like something you may have missed. A stunned silence fell over the room. Adam froze. His expression faltered, and for the first time, he wasn't the confident, controlling figure he'd been earlier. This wasn't part of the script he'd written for himself. I don't know what you're talking about, Adam said, his voice shaky. Ethan calmly gestured to the security personnel stationed around the room. Show him the evidence. Rachel clicked a button on her laptop, and the projector screen flickered to life. On it, the entire series of fake transactions was displayed, each one linked directly to Adam's email address and account. The documents clearly showed the redirection of company funds, as well as internal communications that confirmed his attempts to cover up. That Adam's face went pale. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He tried to stand up, but Ethan gestured for him to sit. You've been siphoning fun for months, Adam. You've been playing us all for fools, Ethan said, his tone laced with disgust. And now, you're going to answer for it. The room was filled with gasps of shock and disbelief as the full extent of Adam's betrayal was revealed. No one knew what to say. Some of the board members sat in stunned silence, while others looked as though they were about to speak up, but the weight of the moment held them back. Adam, who had once been so confident and untouchable, was now cornered. His eyes darted around the room as if he were looking for a way out, but there was none. He was trapped. You've been a cancer in this company, Adam. Ethan continued, his voice cold. And it's time for you to go. The silence in the room was suffocating. Adam remained frozen in his chair, his face pale as the evidence continued to flash on the screen. His mind raced. He couldn't believe it. How had they uncovered everything? The carefully constructed lies, the accounts he'd thought were well hidden, all shattered in an instant. He opened his mouth to speak, but then hesitated. The confidence that had fueled him for so long seemed to drain away in the face of undeniable proof. He had no more excuses, no more stories to spin. You're making a huge mistake, Adam muttered, barely above a whisper. This is a setup. This is all some kind of trick. Ethan's eyes narrowed. A trick? You think I set all of this up just to ruin your career? Adam's voice began to rise, but it lacked the strength it once had. You don't know what you're doing. You don't understand, no. Ethan interrupted, his voice sharp. I understand perfectly. You were embezzling from this company, and you thought you could get away with it. You underestimated me. Adam stood up abruptly, slamming his hand against the table. This is insane. You have no idea what it's like to run this company, to make the tough decisions. Oh, I understand plenty about tough decisions, Ethan replied, standing up as well. But the difference is, I don't betray the people who trust me. I don't steal from the company to line my own pockets. The room was watching, a mix of fear, anger, and disbelief painted across their faces. But Ethan's resolve was unshakable. This was a man who had worked tirelessly to build the company, to put it on the map. And now, he was going to take it back. Ethan turned to the security personnel. Escort him out, he ordered calmly. Adam's face contorted with rage as two security guards stepped forward. You can't do this, he shouted, his voice breaking. I'll make sure you regret this. I'll ruin you. Not today, Adam, Ethan said, his voice cold and final. The guards grabbed Adam by the arms and began escorting him out of the room. Adam struggled, but it was no use. His career, his reputation, everything he had worked so hard for was crumbling in front of him As the door swung open, Adam turned back one last time. "This isn't over," he yelled. Ethan didn't flinch. "No, Adam, it's over." With that, the door slammed shut and Adam was gone. The room remained still for a moment, the tension hanging in the air. Ethan stood there, taking a deep breath. This was the moment that would change everything. The moment he took control of his company once more. Rachel, Bill, and several other board members walked over to him, offering silent support. Ethan nodded to them, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "We're going to rebuild this company from the ground up," Ethan said, his voice resolute. "And we'll do it the right way." Weeks passed, and slowly but surely, the company began to heal. The audit revealed more discrepancies, but nothing on the scale of what Adam had done. With each discovery, Ethan acted swiftly, making decisions with a level of transparency that had been absent for far too long. The employees, once wary and disillusioned, began to regain their faith in the company. Ethan's open-door policy allowed them to voice their concerns, their ideas, and their hopes for the future. One afternoon, Ethan was walking through the office when he noticed a small group of employees gathered around a whiteboard. They were brainstorming ideas for a new marketing campaign. The energy in the room was vibrant, positive, and full of possibility. It was a stark contrast to the atmosphere under Adam's leadership. "Looks like you've got some great ideas here," Ethan said, leaning against the doorframe. One of the employees, a young woman named Emma, looked up and smiled. "We're trying to come up with something fresh, something that reflects the new direction the company is heading in." Ethan nodded. "I like that. Keep it up." As he left the room, Ethan felt a surge of pride. This was the company he had built, and now it was finally on the path to becoming what he had always envisioned, a place where integrity and innovation could coexist. But the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, challenges, and more difficult decisions to make. But Ethan was ready for them. He had been tested in ways he never expected, and now he was more determined than ever to prove that his leadership was what the company needed. The next day, Ethan stood before the entire staff for a company-wide meeting. He had a simple message. This company is about more than just making money. It's about doing the right thing, no matter how difficult it may seem. We're going to be transparent in everything we do. We're going to hold ourselves accountable, and we're going to rebuild this company from the ground up. The room erupted in applause. Ethan knew the journey wasn't over, but for the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful about the future. The company was in good hands, and with the right team by his side, they would thrive once again. Months passed, and the company began to regain its footing. The media frenzy over Adam's downfall eventually faded, replaced by a renewed focus on the company's success and future. Ethan was invited to speak at several industry events, where he shared the lessons he had learned from his undercover experience and the importance of ethical leadership. His story became one of resilience, integrity, and the power of doing what's right, even when the odds are stacked against you. He sat in his office one afternoon, looking out over the city skyline. Ethan reflected on everything that had happened. He had faced some of the darkest moments of his career, but he had emerged stronger, more committed to his values, and more determined to lead the company to even greater heights. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from Rachel. "The board just approved our new sustainability initiative. It's official. We're going green." Ethan smiled. One step at a time, he whispered to himself, IT wasn't just about rebuilding the company. It was about creating a legacy that would last for generations to come.